This is synchronicity.
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 Welcome to Synchronicity. My guest this week features the return of Kathleen Whalen. You know her from the previous episode, Vedic Astrologer, magical woman who really has some strong and crucial insights into the movement of the spheres up above and how that can impact our individual lives and the lives of all of us collectively. And that's exactly what this episode is about. And a lot of stuff about eclipses, too, which are acutely important. And just more about kind of the fundamentals of Vedic astrology and how astrology works. Listeners of the podcast know that I have I was going to say a unique relationship with astrology. I'm sure everyone does. But I don't actively seek it out. But there come these times where it's just in my face all over the place. And I don't know what that is. And then I usually am lucky enough to speak to someone who is an astrologer or who understands this stuff better than I do and get some insights. And it's usually quite eerie how relevant it is. And it's important to distinguish that this isn't some tool that is going to map out your life to the T, or at least if that is possible. This is not what we're talking about in this episode. It's more about recognizing kind of the energetic patterns of these planets and what has been observed for quite a long time. Several millennia, and just seeing how that impacts our lives. I try to not hedge, but toe the line between empirical scientific evidence of this stuff having an impact on us, or theoretically having an impact, and also the kind of more esoteric, symbolic, archetypal meanings of some of these things, which I think are equally as important, right? So that's what this episode is. It was a real pleasure speaking with Kathleen. It's just always a blast talking to her. We gotta, next time we do one of these meetup things, we should definitely have her be a part of it if she can. Speaking of which, I was not compelled to do this. No one told me to do this, but there is a Well-Being in the Modern Age live event taking place April 20th in LA. A lot of people on MindPod Network. My friends Anna Lundgaard and Jen Sodini have taken the Whitma banner and torch and are lighting it around the coast. So go check that out if you can. Whitma Live. A lot of cool people. Michael Phillips on the guest. Ramin Nazer is going to be there. There's just it's going to cool people. Zach Leary. So go check that out. I'll get some links up on this episode so you can go and check that out too. But if you're in the LA area, it's hey, go do it. It's pretty cool. If you want to find out more about Kathleen and what she's doing, go to consciouscalendars.com. Sign up. She's got it all figured out. It's a very good system. You'll see exactly what to do. You can get a month free of the calendar. I find this stuff to be pretty effective, to be honest. And I think when you'll hear in this episode, but when someone really understands something, it's always nice to hear from them rather than people just kind of oh, I just found out about this thing. Let me tell you all about it, which also can be great. But the depth of knowledge that Kathleen provides, I think, is always useful for people who are interested in this stuff. So that's it for this episode. Nothing else. I'm sure I forgot something, but you know what? I've had some long intros recently. How about we just get to the episode? Some cool guests coming next week. How about that? I get that in there. All right. Without further ado, here is Kathleen Whalen. I'm glad to have you back on to talk about some of this stuff.
Oh, thank you. It's always fantastic to speak with you, Noah. And I love our conversations.
Yeah, me too. So one place I wanted to start is, are there any themes, and we're just jumping right in, are there any major themes that are playing out in the Vedic charts that you can relate to what's going on in our world?
Well, very much so.
Yeah.
I was nodding my head. So
Yes.
I'm recording a video as well as audio here. And so, yes, it is extremely timely, but it's also setting a whole new stage of perspective. So what's incredible about Vedic astrology, and one of the reasons I actually even started designing the conscious calendars, was because there are these greater arcs of time, like we had. So like on a huge level, there's these things called yugas, and then each country has its own chart from inception of sort of their latest constitution.
Right.
And they go through planetary cycles as well. But then there's these other things called the eclipse patterns. That's kind of one of the words I give it, is eclipse patterns. And the eclipse patterns, you can see connected with not just Vedic astrology, but you can actually see in Chaka Canyon in the United States. You can see in many ancient traditions, be it First Nation people or cultures that have watched not only the sun and moon, but watched eclipse patterns. And those eclipse patterns have a synodic timing that basically reach 18 and a half years. So there are labyrinths in Chaka Canyon that actually trace where the eclipses occur and that they come back to the same place every 18 and a half years. And if we take a look at the year 2019, in the month of March, in the month in which we are speaking, we have a shift of the eclipse patterns. That simply means that for 18 more months from the month of March 2019, going forward 18 months, we will now have all the eclipses appearing to occur within two constellations. That's just astronomy. That's just astronomy, right? And those two constellations in sidereal astrology, so there's some Western sidereal astrologers, and that map of the sky is the same as an astronomer, it's the same as Vedic astrology. So standing on the earth, when you look up, you're going to see, in general, the eclipses occurring in Gemini and Sagittarius. This is deeply significant for a number of reasons. One of which is it's connected with the first house, or the founding health and vitality, the entire identity of the United States. And the eclipse patterns are always the disruptive forces. That's one of your takeaways. It's the disruptive forces for transformation and change and healing, as I'm showing in rabbit ears.
Yeah.
Sort of thrusting us towards the change that needs to happen, because as most of us know, unless external forces sort of guide us, we might kind of stay the same.
Yes.
Place or
Yes. No, I mean, it's abundantly true. And whenever you have, seemingly external factors influence your life and, rock you out of your normal, I'm doing ears, you can't see me now, existence, you recognize how that catalyst is often needed to kind of jostle you and get you to do something. So that's fast. This cycle of 18 months is very interesting. I asked this because there are periods, and we've spoken about this, funnily enough, in my cryptocurrency server, but how people are very interested in the connection between when everything seems to be the same in their life, objectively looking. There's no deviation in their schedule, their relationships, their financial situation. Everything is just par for the course good, but there feels like there's some energetic, you're doing your hands, you're waving your hands, because it really, this past, 2.5, 3 weeks or so, I have not been able to shake that feeling. There has been days where it's been more acute. And I, as someone who also has had, what would in the Western sense be termed a psychotic or a psychosis for an extended period of time back in the day, I'm always somewhat, cognizant of the fact, well, is there something going wrong with me? Do I have to check my psyche? Is there some other thing? However, beautifully enough, because if community exists, you can bounce this off other people. And it does seem to feel like, for a lot of people I know, that things are especially ramped up right now. So what are some of the influences from a Vedic standpoint? You're holding 3. What does that mean?
So at least 3 different reasons. So one is that these eclipse patterns are shifting, and there's different ways we slice the sky. There's the actual and the mean movement of the eclipse patterns.
Mm.
And so from a science mathematical point of view, that is shifting March 4th and or March 24th. So give or take, we're going to say March 2019.
Sure.
In addition to that, we have Mercury retrograde, which normally, Mercury is retrograding 3 to 4 times a year. It affects some people more than others according to which constellation it's retrograding in. If someone's running a Mercury cycle, there's all these little technical things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't affect everyone the same way, but when we can be cognizant. What's significant about this one is that Mercury is retrograding in a constellation, Pisces, where it, in Vedic astrology, is what we call functions weekly. In other words, the planet of communication, usually when it's retrograde, can cause disruption with scheduling, with communication, with words. Like you could say the same word to someone, and they would understand it before Mercury retrograde, and they would understand it after Mercury retrograde, but maybe during they just don't get it.
Yeah.
Right? So communication is awry, and if you think of it this way, Mercury being the planet of communication, if we think of all the communicative things in our lives, things with wires, computers, our neurological system, what happens when those wires are not protected from water? Because Mercury is retrograding in Pisces, a great water sign. So when you even just conceptually think of wires exposed in water in a place that is considered the 12th zodiacal sign, which is associated with a desire to merge with like the information of the universe and not get caught up in details, right?
Yes.
People who are born with Mercury in Pisces sometimes don't want to parse the details. They just want to know the big strokes of information, and their circuits get fried when they get overloaded with too much information. Mercury has been in that place, and it's been retrograde. On top of that, we have 2 other planets changing constellations. Namely, Jupiter will be shifting very shortly in the month of March into the place where the eclipses will be and connecting with Saturn in Sagittarius, the end of March through April 22nd. And Venus, so as of March 15th, Mercury started to function a tad better, but it's still retrograde. Retrogrades through March 28th.
Yeah, I'm acutely aware. This one's been a doozy for me. So,
right. But our takeaway is, especially if someone's listening to this even 8 months from now or a year from now, it's still pertinent because their takeaway is that there's about 4 to 5 different forces all shifting in the month, including the eclipse patterns, including the fact that these eclipse patterns are coming to a nation and affecting a nation that will affect world markets.
Right. And I mean, the world markets aspect of this is something that I always find myself drawn to, these kind of, in the same way that Jung, postulated that, not only individuals have an unconscious, but that there's a collective and that can pertain to nations and everything. I've always been very interested in these kind of macro looks down, like, because to me, a term, I forget who used it recently, but it absolutely applies, is it's fractal. It's like a fractal, which means the micro is the macro and the macro is the micro. But I love these big kind of overlays, bird's eye view. So this is something that I have also, I mean, I don't know if you know about him. He's kind of a meme at this point. I don't think he'll be considered seriously, but he may be, is this guy Andrew Yang, this Democratic outsider candidate who's proposing a universal basic income for everyone. And it's like, it's so ridiculous at first that like everyone's just like, oh, this is insane. But then you start to realize like, holy, like this is not, I mean, Trump is our president. It's not anything, it's not that crazy. So, I mean, and it feels to me, rather than that actually happening or not happening, what it does kind of point to is that we are at this point where, whether it's AI or automation or blockchain or global markets or people waking up, whatever it is, this shift is happening whether we like it or not. And I can also just add another layer to that. I see it very much in the new age spirituality, consciousness fields, this nexus of kind of, where are we going? How do we ethically honestly, transparently use these and offer these as tools and not be sophists, but actually give people something to help themselves, but also figure out how to, make a living in this world and really do what we think is our mission to do, help people. So what is kind of ramping up these energies? I mean, I know it's a very transformative time, but from your perspective on these broad strokes, what are some of the longer term shifts we're witnessing?
Well, so thank you so much. You're so eloquent at this to draw the conversation to these bigger themes, right? And so one of the things that you're pointing to is that from an astrological point of view, Saturn moved into Sagittarius. And for those of you who may or may not know this, the first 3 degrees of Sagittarius are actually the line that is drawn from the center of our solar system to the center of our galaxy. And that line, so that constellation, those first 3 degrees, you can look at an image. I can even send you an image of that portion of sky.
Yeah.
Sagittarius A. And that portion of sky is directly aligned with literally forces coming into our solar system or our connection to the galaxy. So in terms of our spiraling in the galaxy. So when Saturn, the planet of time, the planet of science, the planet of, now I'm going to make a bit of a leap, and I might have referenced this in a previous conversation. One of my many dream books is to actually discuss Saturn as the great recycler of the universe. So if you look at a metaphor, I'm going to geek out here, is a black hole is a perfect metaphor for Saturn. Because if you take a look at a black hole, certain kinds of black holes, as matter is being sucked into a black hole, you have an event horizon. And as we know, time doesn't exist in the event horizon.
Right.
And certain kinds of black holes, in essence, are also shooting plasma back out into the universe, which is sort of this ultimate recycling of energy in the universe.
Yes.
So Saturn is, in essence, in the Vedic system, it's often associated with death and, returning to the earth and agrarian kinds of connections.
Yes.
To me, Saturn's like exciting because it's like this like force that takes matter and transmutes it, gets it out as plasma and sends it back to us. The takeaway is that basically when Saturn comes to Sagittarius once every 30 years, but in particular only in a particular cycle with Saturn and Jupiter about to come together. So one cycle of 30 years and one cycle of 12 years, you can begin to math that not every 30 years do these two planets come together in a constellation.
Right.
So what begins to happen is there's these greater changes in science. So the laws of science, we could say AI, we could say, right, technology, but in a greater sense, one of the references I'll give you that I didn't mention in our talk before is that Nova did an incredible series on how are Einstein's theories of general relativity being applied to science today. And one of the interesting and somewhat scary, I only say scary in the sense of, I'll be a little jingoistic here, in that like certain technologies I would prefer our country to have. So basically by applying the theories of general relativity, Chinese scientists have proven the general theory of relativity by being able to have different satellites up in our orbit and basically are able to encrypt and determine and secure information to know if something's been listened to. In other words, information can be sent and received by two satellites. And in essence, if there's an interruption, you know it by applying these laws.
Right.
If it's been interrupted, you know someone's listening. So in essence, they're creating these incredibly secure. They're using these models to create secure information, which is kind of a meta level of encryption.
Yes.
Right. And so basically, that's a business. Now, I'm just using that as one example, but in the world of AI and more, what I think is more interesting visually is more the world of holograms.
Yes.
and holographic screens rather than AI VR, because those are headsets and they take you away. Versus, check it out, there are new holographic screens that allow groups of people to view things together.
Yes.
This is going to alter how creative people interact, how creative people create new movements, so that this isn't just for the science and the geeks, that creative people will actually be able to be using the technology in new ways, sort of like what Photoshop and Illustrator have done for creatives in web
Yes.
design. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what I think is very interesting. And these planets coming together are basically sort of transmuting the laws of science and bringing entire new technologies to us, not in a disruptive form, but rather in a way that is applying the laws of science in a way that can literally change how we understand our own spiritual point of view. Because Sagittarius is the 9th constellation. When Jupiter comes to it, there'll be a little dip from March 30th through April 22nd, but then really from the first week of November 2019 for almost a year, Jupiter will be in the 9th constellation of Sagittarius, sort of natural 9th. And what this is going to do is actually finally begin to nourish us on these deeper levels that so many people that follow more natural rhythms and that basically are seeking balance, that are seeking not to have technology throw us off, right?
Yes.
That is actually going to be this like food. And so we get a little taste from March 30th through April 22nd, so we all can observe that. Like, what are we drawn to certain books? Do we bump into certain people?
Yeah.
Right? And where are we being inspired? And there's a difference between being excited, which I've noticed sometimes happens when people are new to sort of the crypto world.
Yes.
Between being excited and being nourished by the curiosity, which is actually a form of positivity or one of the 10 forms of happiness.
Yes. I mean, there's so much there that you just said that intuitively makes light. I liked also the warning. It's a warning for me. You didn't present it as a warning that a lot of my friends at the beginning of this year, 2018 for many of my peers and many people I know was a very rocky year. It just rocked.
The eclipses. So people who are following me, excuse me for interrupting.
No, please.
Following me know that I try and give them 2 to 3 months warning. But that's all, quite frankly, it's for the people who pay me for subscriptions. Like,
right.
I can give you information 2, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months ahead. And so I'll each month kind of go, and heads up everybody, you want to get your stuff done in December because the eclipses are in July. And don't set your new year in January, because the eclipses are in January, everybody. But February is a straight up month. But beware, March is going to be this huge shifty month.
Yes.
The next eclipses are in July, but we got some beautiful months in April, May, June with a couple little edges to them.
Yeah.
It's going to feel very different. And so I didn't really mean that as a plug, but it's more like, yes, it was completely destabilizing. And I tried to let as many people know as I could. Don't set intentions for the year. Chill out on the eclipse days.
Yeah.
Be easy on yourself, but use February as the beginning of your year.
It's interesting because so a lot of people after 2018 are like, 2019, I feel everything has changed. It's going to be the best thing ever. And I somehow was sitting here, I'm like, you know what? Like, it's definitely not 2018. It feels like it's going to be a little more positive than that, but I'm not sure we all have our bearings yet. I think towards the end of the year and moving into 2020, that's going to be like, I think that's going to be what's going on. And I don't have any astrological basis for this whatsoever. But to bring it back to what I was talking about is you mentioned that towards the end of this month and in April, we get this little sampling. Someone like me, that's very useful information because I'm the type of person, if that comes around, I'm like, here it is. We're here. We've arrived. It's permanent forever. Things are good. They're going to stay good forever. Yeah. And it's good to know that I think it is kind of this larger scope of when until Jupiter moves into Sagittarius.
Correct.
So when that happens later in the year. So that's very useful stuff. And this is what's interesting to me is that this type of information seems not only more accessible, but more practical now than ever before. And I don't mean that just to me personally. It just means like I'm in my own filter bubbled somewhat on the internet, but I can see things bubble up that I don't seek out. And it's not just the algorithms. And I see people's willingness and connection to the planetary bodies and how this stuff works and feeling their influences now more than I ever have. And I think that bodes well for society. I know it's easy to get very down and gloomy about things for a lot of people these days, but it is kind of a source of inspiration and optimism for me, because I see enough of it in front of my eyes that people are doing it. It's very cool.
Right. It is. It is also that even the astronomy sites like, Earth Sky News, they're still posting things that are almost meta astrology.
Yes. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of just seeping in a little bit, and I just appreciate it so much, because it's one thing if you rule something off and you're just obstinate and you're just I'm not going to do that. I usually don't do that unless I've vetted something and figured out the reasons why I think it is. And astrology is one of these things that it's like, you may not believe in it, you don't have to subscribe to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist. And I also am one of these people who, when I get in these metaphysical conversations with people sometimes, and they'll be like, well, Tibetan Buddhism is a scam, Buddhism's a scam. I'm like, I was like, yeah, that's one perspective, but it also seems weird that like the Dalai Lama is playing like a super long con on people and making up like thousands of years. It's like, that's weirder to me than maybe this stuff being legit.
Is that, Buddha from a Hindu's point of view was like the great revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
When he said, you don't need all these rituals, you don't need to do things. You can sit and realize the nature of your own mind.
Yeah, it's wild to me how these scales shift and everything. So I wanted to talk about a little bit. I had this written down. I wrote down some quick things right before. What are the origins or kind of fundamental aspects? I know it's planetary based and it's the movement and these cycles we go through, but what are kind of the key energetic forces or roots of Vedic astrology? I know that's kind of an abstract question.
Fantastic question. Always good to establish. So in essence, Vedic astrology is called that. It's kind of a newer term, actually. It's Jyotisha.
Yes.
The word, which means basically allowing the light to illumine path. It's the path of light. And it is connected with the Vedas, or these ancient texts, which happen to be from India. But they're actually documenting in an oral tradition before things were written down, even information that was in existence before 5,000 to 7,000 years ago.
Right.
It began to be compiled. And so Vedic astrology was never separated from the path of understanding health and harmony, which is Ayurveda, which is simply the healing system of India. And it was never separated from yoga, which is actually a mind training experience. So these three are considered sort of sister social sciences, you could say. And so in Vedic astrology, it was only used to counsel kings and mayors. It wasn't for regular folk, because it really was about not just observing the visual planets, but marking regions of sky where eclipses occurred, over lands. And through this, you could say, in a library sense, by documenting through both the myths and also the ancient texts, basically documenting, this war occurred when these things happened. The famine came when these things happened over the land. And so it was really a sort of a documenting, and sort of for a library sense, what was occurring associated not just with a daily or a monthly or even a yearly. We're talking a minimum of, at sort of the very basic level, it's a 60 to 120 year observation of cycles. And greater cycles that have to do with hundreds and thousands of years. And so information can be condensed into chunks of information. Now that's kind of a bigger theoretical thing. On the simplest level, Vedic astrology is based on the concept that we are born on Earth. And this is where it's hugely different than Western astrology. The map itself is based on, you're born on Earth, so therefore on Earth at the moment of your birth, looking to the sky, what was visible, what was not visible, and documenting that moment. And in Vedic astrology, I apologize. In Vedic astrology, in essence, the moment of your birth is not imprinting on you fate, but rather because it comes from a transcendental thought field.
Yeah.
In essence, the idea is that in reincarnation, you actually are incarnating at that moment because that's a reflection of your consciousness. Okay? And depending on, so it's not about something being imprinted on you. It's like, hey, if you were totally evolved, a completely enlightened being, you could, in essence, choose the moment because you got clarity. Going, okay, well, I'll take this, I'll take that, and that. Well, these parents, and the rest of us are a little murky.
Yeah.
And we're sort of hurtling to the earth going, give me a body, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
In that, there is this combination of things we've cultivated, patterns we've cultivated, and other things that we're sort of roughly signing up for to go, hey, I want to cultivate this in this lifetime. Ooh, I want to try that. Ooh, I'll take this kind of body this time. I'm being very sort of not joking, but it's sort of an easier way to describe it.
Totally.
And so in essence, it's a combination of, to our best ability, our consciousness is in essence being reflected at the moment. So if we were pulled out of the womb, if we muscled our way out, all of this is literally in the chart itself. In addition to that, the two other things that are major with Vedic astrology is that it is such an ancient tradition, right? It's older than Western astrology, and the tradition itself was actually first and foremost looking at the moon. If we go back to our history as human beings, we actually see that the most ancient clocks were prehistoric sense. We have documentation that we as humans created these holes in the earth that were marking the moon, because the moon was our original clock.
Well, it changes, right? I mean, the sun is the sun. It's up there. It's might be in different places in the sky, but the moon goes through these phases that it's like, whoa, it looks totally different now. So it makes a lot of sense.
Well, the moon goes through phases, so it allows us on a daily level to have a better sense of time. And then again, the rising and setting of the sun. I'm in a northern, latitude, as are you.
Yeah.
I have almost 120 degrees between winter solstice and summer solstice at those markings as well, where the sun rises. So what began to evolve is a solar lunar calendar. That's the basis of it, is a solar lunar calendar, in order to help us understand not just agrarian cycles and other things, but sort of a greater connection. And then on an individual basis, there's the moment of our birth with our chart, and it's lunar based. So the zodiac was and is 27 lunar mansions, not 12 constellations. That came much later. That's solar based. So in the lunar ancient tradition, the 27 lunar mansions and the moon are associated with our consciousness. In Vedic astrology, we're much more interested in your consciousness rather than your ego state and what you're presenting to the world.
Right.
Which is the sun. Right?
Yes.
We look at the sun, we use the sun for vitality, for health, for looking at career, and the 10th house, which is what was overhead at the moment of your birth. So there's all these ways we can look at those things in Vedic astrology. And the third point that sort of marks Vedic astrology very differently on an individual birth chart or a nation's birth chart are these things called the planetary cycles, or the Vimshottari Dasha cycle, which in this yuga, most of us use the Vimshottari Dasha cycle. I'm just saying that in case an expert is listening.
Yeah.
So in essence, the planetary cycle is this 120-year cycle, which is touched off by where the moon is at the moment of your birth. And the moon is associated with a different planet that then lights up one of the planetary cycles. So if you were born 2 hours before someone in the exact same town, your charts might look similar in terms of where the planets majorly were. But 2 hours later, the ascendant will be different. So therefore, the karmas of the houses are different. And karma is the word that karma comes from Vedic astrology, everyone. So everyone, the word karma, it came from this tradition. So karma, on the most basic sense, means action. It's sort of a documentation of our actions.
Yes,
But
yes.
at a preceded level, even thoughts are what occur sometimes before actions.
Mm-hmm.
Even in thought pattern, your chart is documenting your mental patterns.
Mm. I mean, this is incredible because the granularity that you can get with these kind of shorter and quicker snapshots of what's going on is I'm an analytics person. I've made my career doing web analytics. So like I am very much into like dicing and slicing and like more granularity and broader looks. I love doing that naturally. And this is like the ultimate that. And it's so freaking cool. And like the other thing is that what you mentioned is this hurtling towards a give me a body, give me a body. This very much aligns with what is my internal kind of experience and intuition of how we incarnate here. And in saying that to many people on this podcast and otherwise, I found that lines up with their intuition and experience too. And it's interesting. And if that's the case, let's say we're buying it hook, line, and sinker here that, you know, this is how we get to the planet and we sign up for these experiences. And even if you were describing it somewhat jokingly, I totally get what you're saying. It's like, we do. And just to be clear, it's not always like, hey, I just want to have this fun experience. I mean, someone's signing up for the starving kid and the person who's getting shot in a mosque. Like there's terrible things one could sign up for a specific reason, to learn, to reconcile those karmas, which I know is really, if we're talking about these actions, the goal of most of the traditions that deal with that is to mitigate those, to even it out, to balance these, to, you know, essentially become clear and level. And we choose certain experiences to potentially help us realize that and do that. So, I mean, it's no small wonder to me that I am naturally attracted to the Vedic so much, because I think there's like a level of wisdom there that I don't want to say it's lacking. It's not, but it's different. And I think that difference is very crucial, because it really, that the specificity that you can get is staggering, and not just on the micro, but the macro, these yugas, right? These 100,000 long, multiple hundreds of thousands of long cycles also are embedded in it too. And it makes you think and wonder, well, how did they come up with this? Was it just by looking up at the sky, or was there some internal work that's going on? So yeah, what are your thoughts? I mean, looking back to the etymology, or like intuitively, and I'm going to ask you to speculate somewhat, because this stuff isn't just plainly written down all of the time, the origins of this, as best as you can tell, what kind of led people to look, or not invent, but, you know, co-create astrology, Vedic astrology?
It was, in essence, the natural flowing of sages who sat and had realizations, and found a way to document in this sort of physical way time and what is happening on planet Earth. So the sages themselves were so dialed in, right? They were feeling the pulses from Jupiter every 10 minutes.
Right.
So, like, I love to use this as an example, right? To also bridge our palpable experience when people go deep and can begin accessing their inner universal knowledge, right? There's some people who teach people and say, hey, you can read your own Akashic records. That's great. But, you know, we still need to do our daily practices,
right?
You know, just to stay in touch with sort of moment to moment. And in essence, the sages were able to document, sort of like even in Chinese medicine, entire systems were described with never cutting open a body, right?
Right.
Likewise, the sages, long before, we'll say 5,000 years ago, minimum, in essence, were able to feel the pulses of not just our solar system, but even forces beyond our solar system, and document and get a language for, the energy coming to us from that star system carries this vibrational information. So therefore, when someone is born with a planet in this place, this is about this information that in a mental state that this person has cultivated in previous lives. It's just just sort of like almost the bumps that are created for a self-playing piano. It's sort of like, you play it in and go,
it's like a circular cosmic playing piano. Yeah.
You could say, right. And the ultimate practice on an individual basis, and I'll loop back to the Jupiter thing.
Yeah.
Ultimate practice, in essence, is to sand down our little bumps.
Yes.
So that the tune that we play is not without song, but rather is harmoniously smooth.
Yes.
So that whatever appears on the outside, whatever appears on the inside, is not causing the mind to be wavering. That's the ultimate definition of yoga. Is the mind steady, and to cultivate a sense that whatever happens on the outside, we remain steady. And it doesn't mean that we don't laugh. It doesn't mean that life isn't interesting. But when you're around some really evolved folks, they laugh a lot.
Yes.
They're like, oh, or they're just neutral, like, oh, okay, yep, unruffled, right?
Yeah,
so the ultimate goal of this sort of embodiment, you could say, is like, well, okay, for this body, for this lifetime, for this experience, not even how do I extract the why of anything, but rather being with what is.
Yes.
And here's, of course, the big aha, right? When we are completely with what is, what occurs on that really basic level, right? On a simple everyday level, it's when we feel connected with others. It's when we feel connected with the entire universe. We don't feel disconnected. Great conversations happen. We feel connected with no words.
Yes.
This is on that simpler everyday level, right? What comes to us is not feeling the ruffling of our mind or our reaction to the environment.
Right, which is essentially what everyone is looking for, whether they know it or not. And it gets more and more difficult, I think, for people to achieve that state with everything the way it is right now. We're inundated with just a nonstop barrage of media and quote unquote news and all of this stuff. And
we didn't physiologically evolve to handle this level of stimulus.
Yeah, nor are we in any way taking a step back to just be aware of what's going on. And I don't say that like those people out there, myself included. I mean, I can't tell you the transition from essentially once I got my first iPhone or smartphone and, when I started using it daily and now seeing how with the screen time thing, how much I use it, it's just like we don't have time to adapt, which is why I like dropping in and using tools and maps and modalities that play well with our intuition, because I think that is really what I'm noticing. People who can drop into that, and some of us have greater capacities than others for dropping into our intuitive faculties, but everyone has them. And the things that play nice with that, like astrology, I think are just more and more powerful. They just feel more powerful in terms of their efficacy. And so it leads me to kind of my next question, which is like, on a practical day-to-day or just living your life basis, like how do you use this information? I know how you can, give people little heads ups and things like that, but like this is your life. You use these tools. You've been, blessed to kind of find an amazing system and grok it and share it with people. So like, what does it look like for you on a regular basis using this stuff?
Well, I do have quite an advantage in that, everyone at Conscious Calendars knows what the calendar is. And so with the calendar, I've mapped out where the quiet days are, where the roughly days are, where there will tend to be more either distractions or tech issues or go days. And so like today's a mild green day. The moon is opposite Mercury, but Mercury's retrograding.
Yeah.
The full moon, it's equinox. But what's interesting is that we use it to I personally use it. I try and do the same thing each morning with slight variation because I'm a creative, so I got to keep myself interested.
Yeah.
And so there's set things that I do each day to do my work, but the calendars themselves is this pulse that allows me to set a relative level of expectation, you could say,
Hmm.
of tempering myself so that I find I actually end up laughing at life more on yellow days because there's days of disruption. So
Mm.
like, not that I'm expecting it. I'm like, okay, well, in general, I'm not going to go out unless I need to. And if I do, and then I'll sometimes even go against my own best advice and still try and get some errands done. And then I'm just laughing. And like, I didn't even think of that. Went to the bathroom, there's no bathroom cues. Like, and so there's just like all of these different things that can occur that I follow those rhythms and work with the energies. So everyone in Conscious Calendars, anyone who interacts with me knows we're going to tend to wait to reach out to each other for a new big idea. We're going to have our meetings on green days. So we're looking ahead to the calendar. I have colleagues who help develop systems with me who know, and we all reach out to each other on green days. We set things up for green days. We move things forward. Not that we stack our days tremendously, but there is more flow or foundational energy. Like today's a foundational energy. So it has a little more of a fixed energy, but it's about establishing something that's longer term. So there's different energies to work with. And then on red days, everybody in the staff knows we don't have meetings. We do not do work. We barely log in to anything. It's a day off wherever it lands, right? We live in alignment with these rhythms. I have clients who are flight attendants and surgeons and doctors. Children have been conceived using the calendars to go, hey, it's a green day. Things are open. Things are going. And so that's how the calendars are really used on that daily basis, weekly, and we plan launches.
Right.
Like, oh, we knew March was going to be touch and go, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not even expecting to get those sales pages out. We're lucky if we get them together by the last week of March. We can do this kind of thing here. Oh, we've got straight up energy here. And then we really kind of crank and focus and get more work done. I'm already pre-planning where I'm going to be getting more work done.
Right. And I mean, it's basically bringing in and inviting in harmony to your life and being in tune with what's going on, which doesn't mean I learned this from using the calendar, especially last year. Like, it doesn't mean that red day is bad day. It just means like you want to maybe not do some things that because of this energy that's going on. And like, for people who like me where that just makes sense, and listen, I consider myself woo-woo in a lot of ways, but I don't do things that don't feel correct. And I certainly don't keep going back to things or recognizing the validity of things unless they work and make sense for me. And this stuff just intuitively makes sense. And to bring it back to some of the people in the cryptocurrency server, like that's what they were trying to figure out. And multiple people specifically mentioned you, and this was months ago, were like, you need to have Kathleen back on because what she said made so much sense to me. I'm often wondering, is this just me or I'm seeing this and I'm having all of these weird experiences and is that related to this? And I'm like, you know what, I definitely am going to have her back on because it's something that I think people, once you kind of get presented with it, it's there in your awareness. And then if you can kind of fine tune it and find these little aids, it becomes a real powerful tool for people trying to just find stability, like you said. And it's funny you say today's a foundational day. I didn't know that. I never in the history of this podcast have recorded 2 episodes in one day. And you're my second episode today. And I don't know why I didn't remember, but when I was booking my original guest, I was like, you know who I would like to really have after that is someone who knows something about astrology. And this is before you picked the time, right? I mean, I sent you the link. You picked the time right the same day you booked it. And I was like, this is perfect. Like, this is perfect. So I love that it's a foundational day. I want to talk a little cryptocurrency with you just because I know you're
back in.
Yeah. Because I know it's something that we're both acutely interested in. I think right before we recorded or officially recorded, I was saying I know a lot of people who got very interested in cryptocurrency during the boom of late 2017 and didn't get out in time, put in money and lost, up to 95% of what they put in. And their response, many of these people, was to just write it off and be like, oh, it's just tulip mania. It's a scam. I got hosed. I don't want to know anything about it. And one of the cool things I didn't know what it was at the time. I thought it was going to be like, hey, this is what you should buy. This is what you should do. But this community I created has been this ground where people actually are sharing their experiences, still paying attention to the markets, recognizing the inherent value. One of the most popular projects in the server that was not one of my finds, and truthfully, I don't know a tremendous amount, but I think you'll find interesting, is Holochain, which is a holographic blockchain that is showing tremendous potential. And it's actually been doing quite well for people. So there is a lot of stuff there for those of us who stay actively involved and believe there's something here. What's kind of your take on cryptocurrency and blockchain?
Yeah, well, what I have always found the most interesting about the entire crypto movement, and what I was talking about back in 2010 and 2013, because the eclipse forces in 2013 were in a place of societal change. Even though many people didn't kind of come into the wave until after that, 2013 was really the foundation where blockchain was really just beginning to become language between.
That's when I bought Bitcoin for the first time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so that societal change and what blockchain has actually brought, and that's what I like to speak about, is blockchain and how it's changing, creating the movement for social change and for creating, right, in essence, the world currency. So separate from the speculative aspect, what blockchain has actually been doing, as we know, is it conceptually is bringing in ideas of ownership of our social media presence, of being able to control not only our own money, but being able to control our equity, right? Which is our social presence, which is all of these other. And so that concept is actually bringing about great social change.
Yes.
Is really at the root. And I know a lot of people get very excited about the currency part of it, right? Of like, world currency. But, there are so many different currencies to track, right? That's where people can get support from you, right? Is to come in and get much more support from people who've been doing this for a while. And I love the energy of your community, right? It's just got a goodness to it, right? People are fair and civil.
Yeah, they are. It's weird, just so people know this, that's very atypical for the cryptocurrency space. It's kind of like a minefield of like alt-right crazy libertarians. It's very weird. So yeah, we pride ourselves on not being that. Yeah.
Right. And so with that goodness, I mean, if anything, that's a reason to just like have a pulse, right? To be connected with that goodness. That's part of what we're all seeking, right? Is a sense of connectedness with community and life, be it virtual or, in our neighborhoods. And so that's one of the major forces that I feel is getting rooted in an entirely new way with this current shift, is that, like you mentioned, right? The person who's running, Andrew's running.
Andrew Yang. Yang Gang 2020.
Right. Yeah. Bringing in these new concepts, because basically, as outlandish as some things sound, the new concepts are the things that will bring about the societal change 20 years later. Right. And so that's where to run away and say, oh, I'm washing my hands of it, it makes much more sense to keep a finger on the pulse of where the wave is really going. And as I mentioned, if one is following the wave, then yes, they will be behind things, versus being proactive and feeling connected. And even if they're only following their intuition of like, wow, what's this? What is this leading to?
Yes.
Let me make some sagacious choices and mark down dollar amounts that I go in and dollar amounts at which I will trigger and get out.
Yes.
That's basic learning, right? That's sticking with some standards so that you don't get burned is one thing, but then following intuition, saying, where is this leading me? It could be developing a friendship.
Yes.
Not about making the money, but that ultimately it will be, oh, there you are in someone else's home across the world because you home swapped.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm really interested in, is that entire movement of how people can be open to their world community in a way that has never happened before.
Yes. And that is exactly what drew me to Bitcoin originally. Was I mean, anyone who bought Bitcoin or acquired Bitcoin in 2013 really didn't think that this was going to be valuable in the future. It was kind of just a shot in the dark, but what a lot of people hooked them into it was exactly what you're talking about. This concept of a more fair, decentralized, autonomous, kind of useful form of value exchange that could be used altruistic, could be used for anything, but it was different and it was changing kind of things how they were done, which was not working out for the majority of people in the world. So it's funny you mentioned this house sharing thing, because this is what actually ended up emerging on my server. Is people started visiting each other when they were in countries or close by and doing ceremonies and learning about ritual, and everyone remarked the same thing, myself included. Like, again, this was not my intention when I started this server, but they're like, wow, like this place has really become like an amazing ground for ideas and community. And, yes, we are still paying attention to the markets and trying to find optimal entry points and exit points, but this has turned into something entirely different. And I think the wisdom to be able to see in any capacity, what you're doing right now, that this can evolve into something else that is fundamentally helpful for a sustainable society of people who care, like that's really cool. And that's something that is just not spoken about with blockchain or any of this stuff, because it is viewed. I mean, I got I got my crash course of being a trader. I mean, I had never in a million years would have ever traded stocks or anything, but I saw what it was like for a solid, 6 to 8 months of what it was like making a lot of money, losing a lot of money, managing emotions. And it was an amazing kind of community binding experience, which to me is like, that's what this stuff is about. When we talk about money and making a lot of money or being able to do this, I always used to point out to people like, yeah, you might 10 times today. What are you going to do with it? What's your intention? Why would you want to have this? And for the people who are like, I want to start a sustainable farm. I want to, build a community initiative. I want to bring indigenous cultures more awareness and that's the shit that's important to me, and to not lose sight of that, because, we also have some people who are in here who just want to make a crap load of money and dominate a marketplace. That's just the world. It's kind of the diaspora of the world. So I love that you bring this stuff up. It's just so relevant and cool.
Yeah, that's how I see the true gift of it, because it is still so evolving, but ultimately I do think it is going to affect future voting systems. So quadratic voting is something that was brought in by a gentleman I'm going to give you the link to. But there's a whole concept of actually using blockchain in order to alter how we interact societally, and owning the equity of our vote, owning the equity of our information, owning the equity of our finances. And that's really what I feel is the largest changing part of this. And we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg. This next 18 months is actually going to it's actually not even going to reveal fully. We're just going to get the touch of yet another level of disruption that is bringing about that change that is evolving over the next 18 and a half years. Okay? Because if we go back 18 and a half years ago, that was 9/11. We're coming back into some of the forces again. Okay? And that is something you can have me back and we'll talk about that a little.
Yeah.
People can be aware. But at that evolutionary influence, you can see how a combination of, both paranoia caused people to withdraw, but also at the same time, how it has brought more and more people out to say, you are my brother, you are my sister, I am standing for you. We are all, all one. For the people who were being,
persecuted, oppressed. Right.
And so ultimately this is this change that's about to occur that's going to stir the pot again, but it's actually going to create a more universal society depending on how we choose. Be it we're choosing eco, be it we're choosing, creating harmonious communities. That is really what this change is about. US, and then how it will affect some of the US markets as well.
Yes.
Stabilization, honey, we're just about January is nothing.
Jeez.
Not for anybody. But the thing is, it's the whole year. There are periods where it will be. And I can definitely say, heads up, July is the next set of eclipses. And those are what I call the mega red days. And Mercury will be retrograding again, but it won't be in the same place, won't be as weak. And then there's another set of retrogrades at the end of or another set of eclipses at the end of the year. And, I've given everybody heads up as when those are and how to use that energy. But the main thing is we don't have to be paranoid. We just want to use the information, say on a trading basis. Great. I'm not going to trade on red days. I'm not going to trade on mega red days because those aren't days for making money. They're days for nourishing ourselves and doing spiritual practices. That's all.
I love it so much.
Money. Great. Okay.
I love it as a tool that is both practical and ethereal in many ways. I think it's the perfect combination of both, and I really enjoy it. So, before I get to the questions where we end the show, let people know where to find you, how to get in touch, conscious calendars, all of this stuff, because I know at this point people are like, all right, I get it. I get it, especially if they've heard you before, because like I said, I rarely get feedback on return guests. Like I look at a lot of new ones, but you were brought up several times by many people who I respect and admire. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. So Conscious Calendars is the main site, and anyone who signs up for the first time gets 1 month of the calendars for free. And depending on when you sign up, sometimes I'm gifting 2 months just to make sure people get a nice chunk to test it out.
Yeah.
And that's basically at consciouscalendars.com. There's information. I put up blog posts so that people can also stay in touch with the pulse on, some people may not be on Instagram, but I believe it's at Conscious Cals. And in general, you can just stay in touch with the energies of the full and the new moons on the free newsletter. I give tons of free information.
Yeah.
And in essence, it's really about us just sort of feeling all of that pulse together.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. Last questions. Let's see if they've changed. We can compare and contrast. What's your favorite color?
Green.
What's your favorite number?
6.
What's your favorite? 6 is an unused. Not a lot of people say 6. I got to say, I ask this a lot. What's your favorite animal?
Ooh, I had sort of wolf and bear flash in front of me.
Very cool. Wolf, bear.
But eagle is one of my main.
Just 3. I'll give you 3. 3 is allowed. 3 is allowed. It's a good number. Last question. What's a practical tip that's helped you in your life that you could share with people listening?
We can find evenness and our center in any single moment.
I got to remember that. That is really, really good. And I need to remember that more often. Kathleen, thank you so much for coming on again.
Very welcome. It is my pleasure. Thank you so much. You're such a fantastic interviewer.
We're going to do it again soon. I would love to check in somewhat regularly because these are great.
Yeah, I'd like that too. Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye
Bye-bye.
now.
Thanks for listening to that episode. Kathleen is at consciouscalendars.com. Go check it out. For people who are here or listening past the music, CryptoSync, the cryptocurrency server, that's still going on. It's more than just a cryptocurrency server. You heard a little bit in this episode. I was talking with my friends in there? How do we let people in? What's a good thing? I tried the monthly pricing thing in Bitcoin. Was somewhat popular when everything was going up, but I think I'm doing this. We're just doing lifetime access now. So if you're interested in that, you can find out more at syncpodcast.com/cryptosync. And I'll reveal some other details about how to join in the future, but it's a pretty cool place. I honestly have been really surprised how well it's been going when the price of various cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, has been down significantly for the past year and a half. So, but it's really provided kind of a place for people to learn, manage their emotions, risk management, share with each other, kind of pool each other's knowledge together in the scene, not just related to cryptocurrency, but psychedelics. A lot of cool stuff in there. So if you're interested in that, you know what to do. Feel free to reach out, Noah at syncpodcast.com. Lots of cool stuff going on. Oh, and coming up, MindPod Network. We're going to start featuring a podcaster's stuff every week on mindpodnetwork.com. So go and check that out if you haven't. I'm going to be doing some updates there in the next month or so. So that's it for this week, and I'll see you next week.